WarThunder Simulator Battles is the hardest game mode to balance for Gaijin. Gaijin can balance Air RB and Air Arcade fairly easily. In fact, we often see BR changes for these game modes maybe once or twice a year. Simulator Battles doesn't really seem to get new maps, new game modes, and might change the rotation of the BRs, but that's really about it. Now, Air Simulator Battles, if you guys are not familiar with, is, well, the hardest technical game mode you can play in WarThunder. Air RB is a realistic version of what Air Arcade is, and Air Simulator tends to be a game mode that is more accustomed to players who are considered either sweats or nerds. I will say Air Sim is a fun game mode, but it is definitely not for everyone, and it is not user-friendly. Now, Gaijin has a hard time balancing this because Simulator Battles is not a game mode that is reliant on, or isn't really reliant on what teams offer. Yes, having a bad team could mean that you're going to be in more trouble, but oftentimes Simulator Battles can be determined via one really good player in a BR and capable aircraft. A great example of this is at top tier or around top tier, the F-18s in Simulator Battles are still 12.3. Where in Arcade and Realistic, they're closer to 13.0, depending on which aircraft they are. And in Sim, the Tomcats are very dominant, but that doesn't necessarily make them unbeatable. Things like the MiG-29 are often considered up-tiered as well because they have to fight against things that sling AIM-120s and other Fox 3s. It really is so player-dependent, though, because not every Sim player is the greatest player out there. But when you do run into a really good sim player and a very capable aircraft, it's going to be a very hard challenge to actually beat them. Now, I'm not crazy familiar with sim. I don't have a lot of time playing the game mode, but I have played it enough to tell you it is a fun game mode to try to, once you're actually able to play it. The issue is, when you get a player that is capable and an aircraft that is, good, or at the BR is considered, he's considered the best at his BR or the most capable at his BR, it can be very challenging to do anything against them. This isn't like Realistic, where you have oftentimes US fighting US, and so you have the AIM-120 spam on your team. Or when the Falcor 90 was added to the game, the Falcor 90 spam. Imagine that in Simulator, but only one side gets it. So if you're, Red 4 or Russian players or Chinese players, and you're constantly going up against American pilots who are using AIM-120s, you're oftentimes at a disadvantage. Now, not to say that they can't do anything. Yes, it's just a lot more difficult, and oftentimes you'll see that in Simulator Battles, teams that have the US or have NATO aircraft tend to seem to perform much higher. Especially France aircraft. The Mirage 2000 and the Rafale with the Mika EM seem to be one of the most dominant, if not the most dominant, at Simulator Battles in top tier. Another great example of this is teams that get Eurofighters. You won't often find teams that are, paired with Russia, unless maybe Italy or Germany, but oftentimes you'll find Russian and Chinese teams going up against, Eurofighters, Hornets, F-15s, F-16s, Gripens. I think the most familiar that I'm with how the Air Sim, BR, or how the Air Sim places, is that it can be random, but it mostly is like NATO versus Red 4 aircraft. So I'm not, crazy familiar. From what I had seen, a lot of times it looked like it was Russia, China, Germany, Japan, or a lot of times just China, Japan, Germany, maybe some Italy. So it isn't like, Red 4 teams are in trouble. They definitely have access to capable aircraft. It's just that in those games where you don't have access to those capable aircraft that it can become an issue. I also have heard a lot of sim players complain about, the AIM-9M Sidewinder. The AIM-9M Sidewinder is invisible. It has no smoke trail. If you're a Russian or Chinese or, anyone going up against any aircraft outfitted with the AIM-9M, you're already put at a massive disadvantage. You cannot see the missile coming at you. Now, yes, that doesn't necessarily mean it's, going to guarantee a victory, but it definitely is better than a giant smoke plume that is left with the R-73. It really just comes down to how Gaijin is going to want to try to balance out Sim. There really is no good way to do it, because they can't balance players. They can try to balance aircraft to the best of their abilities, move the Tomcats up, move the MiG-29 down, change things with other aircraft that are considered not correct. That's the best that they can do. Otherwise, I think Simulator Battles is going to remain the most non-balanced game mode out there. Simply because you can't balance when you're trying to go fully realistic. You have to match vehicles to what their capabilities are to the best of your abilities to be considered a simulator battle mode. We already have plenty of people in RRB complaining about it being too unrealistic. Gaijin does seem to try sometimes to actually make correct things, but other times it's swept under the rugs as either balancing reasons that the stuff was added, or they just want the aircraft to have that capability. A great example of this is the F5C, one of the most popular premiums in the game, never carried countermeasures IRL. Or things like the F-18, outputting way more thrust than they actually should, and they go way faster than they should when a full combat load. The MiG-29's missing a couple thousand pounds of thrust. The Su-27 missing thrust. I think that's been changed, but correct me if I'm wrong. Other aircraft, U.S. aircraft constantly missing good weaponry pieces, radar nerfs, changes to RWRs that aren't realistic, buffs to RWRs that just aren't there, changes to missiles that just are non-existent, the addition of the KH-38, a missile system that isn't even in use with the Russians. So it really is a whole lot of whatever Gaijin wants to add, they'll add. So end of the day, if they want to balance something, they can just nerf it or buff it unrealistically. But in simulator battles, they seem to try to keep it as realistic as they can. But it just kind of seems like they get to pick and choose. Anyways, let me know your guys' thoughts down below in the comments. Do you guys think simulator battles will remain the most balanced or most non-balanced game mode out there, or do you think Gaijin will balance it out? Again, it's really hard to balance players. It's next to impossible. But I want to know your guys' thoughts down below in the comments. If you guys are not already subscribed, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing. Join the Discord link down below in the description. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.